Everyone, the 2025 Berkshire Hathaway annual shareholder meeting just wrapped up, and I thought I'd share my takeaways and my thoughts about the meeting. I was able to actually attend in person, so it was great to be able to be there at that moment that Warren actually announced his retirement, and I'm very excited and glad that I decided to go. So some questions heading into the meeting are on the screen here. I was curious about if there's any acquisitions that they've done, just given the recent market volatility. It was actually unveiled that Greg and Warren were actually working on a transaction that would have been around $10 billion, but they ultimately decided not to pursue it. Later, a shareholder asked a question about, hey, could you guys tell us what that opportunity was? And Warren said, no, we cannot. So maybe there's something still in the works. Deals like that sometimes take a long time, especially ones of that size. The trade war, I was a little bit surprised at Warren's tone based on the comments that he made about the ongoing trade war that the U.S. is engaged with currently. In regards to the trade war, Warren was very critical of tariffs and was very critical of politicians in general. In his view, one of the most important jobs of government is to maintain a stable currency, and he fears about a runaway inflation situation. He says you see this time and time again in other countries where the incentive for the politicians is to just print money, and that is good for them, but bad for citizens long term. And he talked about that quite extensively. Warren started his remarks promptly at 8 a.m. Central. He used it as an opportunity to thank long-term director Ron Olson. It was his last meeting here in 2025. He also thanked Tim Cook, who he said jokingly, Tim's made more money for Berkshire than I have, so that was a cool moment. When he was thanking Tim Cook, he also talked about Steve Jobs and how Steve was the only person that could have got Apple up and going, but Tim was unique in the fact that he has taken the business so far. Probably a tip-off that we should have seen it coming. His remarks later in the day about him stepping away and letting Greg take over as CEO. Some things I was watching for, again, we talked about opening remarks, but Ajit, he sold a bunch of his stock last fall. That actually was not brought up during the meeting, and Ajit actually left halfway through the meeting. He was available for the morning session for the Q&A, but then after lunch he did not return to sit on the panel with Warren and Greg. So I think there are still a lot of questions surrounding Ajit's involvement in the business going forward. AI specifically wasn't brought up in regards to the power business for Berkshire. So some of the Q&As that we got on Saturday were interesting. Starting here in the bottom right, there was a question that someone asked, and I feel bad for them, but it was a funny moment. They asked about Portillo's. It's a fast food chain in Chicago. And he asked, how does this fit in with Berkshire's portfolio? What did you guys see in the business? And Greg and Warren kind of looked at, it's like, what are you talking about? We don't own Portillo's. Maybe it's a subsidiary of a subsidiary. And actually what had happened was there's a private equity firm called Berkshire Partners that bought Portillo's. And the shareholder that asked the question thought that Berkshire Hathaway bought the business. So that wasn't the case. It was a funny moment. One of the heaters was a 17-year-old, a girl from Omaha asked Greg about carbon emissions and how Berkshire is going to protect the environment for future generations. It was a pointed question right at Greg, and you could tell it was a little bit uncomfortable. On the left-hand side, another heater. It kind of felt like a personal question as well, but it was a fair question directed at Greg. It was, Greg, you're going to have this cash pile of $300 billion. In the next few years, you're going to have to allocate more capital than Warren and Charlie ever did in Berkshire's history leading up to this point. What are your thoughts on capital allocation? And Greg, he tried to make light of the situation initially by saying, we got big shoes to fill. So that was a tough one for him as well. A personal softball that was thrown to Warren was, what kind of high school classes would you recommend someone pursue when they're early on in the journey? And Warren basically stressed the importance of surround yourself with people that you really admire, because the more time you spend around those people, the more you're going to be like them. So I had a great time at the meeting. It was also cool. I got to take a picture with Richard Coffin of the Plain Bagel. So between the two of us there, we've got over 1 million YouTube subscribers. It's great to meet Richard, and glad he made the trek down. All right, everyone, let me know what you thought of the meeting if you went, and what your thoughts are on Berkshire post Warren Buffett. We'll see you later. Thanks.